صلوا على محمد وآل محمد.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وآل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين، ولعنة الله على أعدائهم أجمعين إلى يوم الدين. صلوات.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
And a second salawat for Abdullah wa Habibullah Muhammad al-Mustafa, peace be upon him.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
A third salawat for Asadullah al-Ghalib Ali ibn Abi Talib Amir al-Mu'mineen.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
And a final salawat for Al-Qa'im al-Mahdi.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. Allah has promised to the believing men and believing women gardens beneath which rivers flow, and abide therein, a goodly garden of perpetual abode, and the best of all of Allah's goodly pleasure. That is the grand achievement. And best of all is Allah's goodly pleasure, and that is the grand achievement. Sadaqallahu al-Aliyyul Azim. Tonight's topic of discussion, as I mentioned yesterday, was what? Why be religious? So that's going to be the topic for tonight. Why be religious? What's the point? Why not just enjoy the bounties and the beauties and the treasures and the pleasures of this world without having to worry and complicate our lives? Is this halal? Is this haram? Does this have gelatin in it? Doesn't have? Since grade 2 I've been listing gelatin in this and not. Why complicate everything? Why not just enjoy? So that's what we're going to be discussing tonight. And to me, the answer is very, very simple as to why one should be religious. Irrespective of whether there's a heaven or hell, the answer is very simple as to why one should practice religion. And it can be answered in one word: happiness. If one truly wishes to be happy, he has to be religious. If one wants to find happiness in his heart and in his soul, he must be a man of God. Outside of that, every other happiness is temporal and short-lived. But one to find true happiness must be a person who fears Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and who is a man of Allah and a woman of Allah, person of Allah. Every single decision we make, irrespective of what faith, what creed, what color, what nationality, what profession, what trade, whatever it is you study, anything you sell, buy, eat, drink, whatever the case may be, every decision we always make is why? Because it will give us happiness. Whatever the decision is, whatever we move towards, the only reason we do it because we find there's an end game. The end game will be happy. Maybe right now the decision I make, I'll feel it's hard. Later on, I see there's joy in it. Otherwise, no one would move towards it. Sometimes we make a decision, the result of it is the exact opposite. It's pain, it could be agony, it could be sadness, failure, but the intention was what? The intention was happiness when starting that process. That was the intention. The follow was different, but the person took that path in pursuit of happiness. So that's tonight's discussion. I'm going to compare worldly happiness in comparison to people who are religious and their form of happiness, and how one is a part of the other to some extent. So that's what we'll be discussing tonight. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
So what kind of happiness coming through worldly affairs? The Quran clearly describes it. It's power, it's children, it's women, it's houses, it's cars, for example, it's substances, it's intoxicants, it's gambling, whatever the case may be. These are the pleasures of this world. From wealth to money to cars to power to whatever the case may be, to women to children. to having a big name, and these are the joys of this world. So when looking at these joys, before I go into trying to disprove that won't bring happiness, that's not what I'm doing. Because you can enjoy the pleasures of wealth, you can enjoy the pleasures of the opposite gender, you can enjoy the pleasures of children and of food, all within halal means as well. The difference is in one you recognize Allah's Sharia and the other one you didn't. But the end is the exact same. So I'll compare the difference between the two. Even though the thing you're enjoying is the same, one is with the Sharia and one is outside the Sharia. And before I go to the Quran and discussing how going towards happiness outside of Islam won't bring about true happiness, let's look at just the world around us. I think a person who answers this so beautifully is Muhammad Ali. He's on a talk show in London, and one of the people in the audiences looks at him and tells him, and you're talking Muhammad Ali, he owned the boxing ring, and still till now he's famous, and his name will still ring out into centuries. And a man at his time, good looking, wealthy, celebrity, power, well spoken, what was he missing? And look when he comes and he answers this question. One of the kids in the audience looks at him and says, after you finish boxing, what are you going to do with the rest of your life? And he answers this question so insightfully. What does he come and say? I was like, I'm 35 years old now. Most guys right now, they say, okay, I'm 35. What am I going to do with my life? They'll have some whatever generic answer. I'll be this, I'll be that, open this business, I don't know what. He says, if I'm 35 now and I live till I'm 80, that's 45 years, right? And in 45 years, I'm going to sleep 8 hours a day of that 45 years. And you do the math, 8 hours times 45 years, let's say translates into 15 X amount of years. I'm going to eat for this many hours in that 45 years. I have to go to the washroom this many times in that 45 years. I'm going to be cold this often. I'm going to be sick this often. He kept subtracting time away from his 45 years. I'm going to be traveling this much. I'm going to be in a car this much. I'm going to be in a plane this much. So he comes and he says, out of that 45 years that's actually left of my life, when you come and ask me what I'm going to do with it, you're actually asking me maybe about 20 years. Maybe I got 20 years of time where I can use that time to what I think is worthwhile. And what does he come and say? He's like, with that 20 years left, I'm going to get ready to meet God. What a beautiful answer. What an insightful answer. I'm going to get ready to meet God in 20 years. He's like, God doesn't care that I beat George Foreman in the 5th. God's not going to ask me what I did to Frazier in the 7th. God's going to ask me if I was a good man, if I was a good neighbor, if I was a good father. And you're talking about those pleasures? Who didn't have women? Who didn't have children? He says, my wife, after I died 1 year, she'll be with somebody else. He's like, my children, because he was divorced at the time, he's like, my own children call another man daddy right now. His own children call another man father, right? He's like, what do I own in this world? I got heaven to look forward to. So in those 20 years, that's what I'm going to go after. He had the pleasures of this world, and he saw they were short-lived, and he saw they weren't even his. If his own children were going to call another man father, and his wife was going to be with... He's like, what's the point of this? And in those years of pleasure, how often will he be sick? And now, subhanAllah, look at his age. Look at the disease that came before him. A man as powerful as him can now be taken out by any 15-year-old or 10-year-old. A man as strong as Muhammad Ali, when you mention Muhammad Ali, people used to fear hearing his name. Now anyone can come and push him over. When he had all those pleasures. And as for houses and wealth and being a celebrity, I can go into the facts and what do these people enjoy? Sleeplessness, anxiety, stress. I'm talking all these celebrities, all these Hollywood stars and all these athletes. How much of them go towards suicide? How much of them have depression? How much of them are on sleeping pills? How many of them are constantly drunk? Why? Well, they have the pleasures of this world. Why then do they find themselves in a place of sickness all the time? And on top of that, they're being used most of the time. They're expensive slaves. It's interesting to think, a person has all those things that I just mentioned previously, yet he's still not happy? With all the wealth and all the power and all the celebrity? He's still going to the presence, and he's still anxious, he's still stressed, and he still has this disease and this sickness and this mental ailment, and he's jumping from one rehab center to the other rehab center. He's attempted suicide this many times. He's got divorced this many times. He doesn't know who his kids are. If happiness was solely based on power, wealth, and celebrity, then why are they not happy? Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
And to further illustrate the story, a famous director, Tom Shiliak, he directed movies like Bruce Almighty, Ace Ventura movies. He had a house, 17,000 square feet. He had a manager just to manage the property, for example, 17 or 11. He had a garden boy, a cook, a chef, an accountant. He had a whole staff just to manage his property. And when he had all that, because now he lives in a shed. He sacrificed everything he had. He gave away all his wealth. And he's like, now that I have less, I feel lighter and I feel happier. Why is that? Why did he come to that conclusion? So if happiness is solely based on things, trust me, brothers and sisters, you will get bored. Money will get boring. That new car will get boring. That house that you worked so hard for will get boring. If there isn't a purpose behind it, you look for another hit. You look for the next rush. You look for the next big thing. And that's, for example, drug addicts, what do? They take one hit, the next hit, the next, until they eventually OD. They're always looking to up it through worldly pleasures. The end is what? Is devastation. And trust me, I'm not here, like I know some of these brothers here, they have friends maybe. And these friends, they're involved in bad things. And you try to pull away from that group of friends, and what happens? You get bored, you get sucked back, you go back to them. You know what I mean? They're involved in inappropriate things. And trust me, when you pull away from them, they feel bad. Not because they lost you, they feel bad for themselves that they don't have the strength to be religious. And when you come back, they're happy you come back, not because they love you. They come back, oh, okay, he couldn't do it, I can't do it, so I don't feel as bad anymore. It's a vicious circle between these friends. One tries to jump, he gets sucked back. This one tries to jump, eventually they're going to this place and this inappropriate place and taking in this bad substance. Trust me, it's not out of love they're happy to see you. It's out of self-pain. And when you do rip away, they look at you with jealousy and they wish they could do it. And don't look at them and ever think, oh, I wish I could still be like that, because trust me, they're not happy being like that. They wish they were beyond it and past it and have advanced as a human and as a person. So don't ever look at them and think, oh, no, it's not a matter of that. So I want every single person here who maybe thinks he's involved in this group of friends to genuinely think about that and try to pull away sincerely if you feel like you could positively influence them. I'm not saying to cut them off. But don't sacrifice your akhirah for a friend that in the end of the day, in Yawm al-Qiyamah, he won't do nothing for you. In the end of the day, on this day, no one's going to do nothing. On that day, the Quran tells us, a man will sacrifice all that is in the earth, including his family and the ones that took care of him and the ones that loved him, in order to redeem himself alone. You think that one friend is going to do you anything on that day that you were too unable to break away from his peer pressure? And now going to the Quran to further prove my point about how worldly pleasures and bring no result. And they ask you about the intoxicants and games of chance. Say, in them there is a great sin and some means of profit. The Quran acknowledges it. And some means of profit for men. But their sin is greater than their profit. The Quran is telling us, okay, there's some benefit in it, but the sins of it are much greater. We can go into the facts now. This many million beaten, this many kids were beaten, this many kids don't have food to drink because their parents are buying this and that, and how many car accidents and how many people are dying on the roads. All because of what? Because their sins outweighs the benefit of it. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad.
Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
And when we look at the Quran further, people who had it all, celebrity, prestige, power, honor, fame, nobility, wealth. You look at who? Asya. You tell me any girl here, any daughter here, is her father Pharaoh? Is her husband Pharaoh? Is her brother Pharaoh? And she comes and says she can't be religious? Asya, one of the 4 greatest women of the world, as said by the Prophet, her husband was Pharaoh. Does any father say I'm God? Any husband say I'm God? Any man killed as many people as Pharaoh? No girl has the, if Asya, does any girl have the palaces that Asya had that she sacrificed? The wealth that she had, does any girl have to sacrifice that? She was married to Pharaoh. And here, because of how much he loved her on top of that, he loved her. Some hadith say he wouldn't even let her walk, she would always be carried around the palace. And then this woman, who was that, it hurt him when he had to go crucify. He even had another believing woman killed in front of her to scare her away from Tawheed. And to get her to denounce Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he had another woman killed in front of her. Has any father done that? Has any brother done that? Has any husband done that? Asya watched that. And she enjoyed all the pleasures of this world. But she had more peace than those celebrities we were talking about that didn't have Allah. With all the wealth and the fame, anxiety, stress, sleeplessness, right? Asya, with Pharaoh as her husband, but Allah in her heart. What does she say when he goes to crucify her and he holds her from limb to limb, ties her to the pillars and stretches her body? She continues to claim Tawheed and she died crucified like this. But in a peaceful, a heart of peace. Never did she feel like she was missing out on anything. And she sacrificed all that while being happy she had Allah. What does she come and say in the Quran? My Lord built for me a house with thee in the garden and save me from Pharaoh. She didn't say just build me a house. No. Build me a house in Jannah. No. Build me a house with thee. She wants a house with Allah. So you see, there's a difference between having a house in Jannah and having a house with Allah in Jannah. Right? Why did she sacrifice everything? Why she had a place of peace with the decision she made? Because she's a person of Allah. And you look further, Sayyidah Zainab. Sayyidah Zainab was the queen of Medina. Married to who? Abdullah bin Ja'far. Who was who? One of the wealthiest men of Medina. Was that not the case? Why did she decide to leave towards Karbala? Why did she decide to give away her sons Aun and Muhammad? And why would she decide to do that? And when seeing all that she saw, the decapitation of her sons and her brothers, of her killing of her brother Abbas and Hussein, you think that's any sight for any sister to see? When she sees all that, is she in a state of depression? Is she in need of this place and that place, and she's sick and she's that and she's stressed and she's facing anxiety? When Ibn Ziyad asks her what she saw, we're all very familiar with this hadith. What does she come and say? She answers, I saw nothing but beauty. How? How does that make sense? When the people of wealth are having anxiety issues, when they're living in a blissful area, when she comes and sees all that she does, she comes and says what? I saw nothing but beauty. And then she continues to tell Yazid, I thank Allah and I gave praise to Allah that He gave us martyrdom and mercy. How? She's saying Alhamdulillah here. After witnessing what she witnessed and the tough travels she went through going to Sham, she continues to be in a place of happiness and peace. To me, it's amazing. When you compare that with that first group of people that I was talking about. And then Khadija. Was she not one of the wealthiest women of Arabia? And when she died, how did she die? The hadiths mention she died without a kafan. The Prophet did not even have a kafan to bury his Khadija in. The angel Jibreel came down and descended upon her in order to bury her with a kafan because she gave away all her wealth for her husband and for Islam. Did she die in a state of agony, or was she in peace with who she was? Dying with the Prophet, was she in peace? Was she happy? Or was she in a state of stress when she enjoyed all the wealth before? The Quran says, the love of desires of women and sons and hoarded treasures and gold and silver and well-bred horses and cattle and land is made fair seeming. And Allah is He with whom is the good goal of life. All those previous things are made fair seeming. The good goal of life is with Allah. And Allah is with whom is the good goal of life. All those other things, okay, no problem. But what's the good goal of life? The good goal of life is with Allah. What does Asya say? I said earlier, with thee she wants to be. So the Quran mentioned all those worldly things. But the good goal of life is what? Being with Allah. We are not here to simply just follow our desires. And I'm going to get to the part where we talk about how we can enjoy it worldly wise. That's not an issue. That's not what I'm saying, is denounce the world. That's not what I'm saying. But Imam Ali, on stressing on this point that we're not here just for this world, what does he come and say? One who is a slave to his lusts is many times more slavish than an actual slave. One who's a slave to his desire and his lust is more of a slave than an actual slave. And brothers and sisters, you're humans. We're Shias. We're lovers of Ahlul Bayt. Our value is much greater than anything you're willing to sacrifice yourself for. Whatever haram we go towards in order to get a house or a car is not worthy of you. You're greater than it. Why be a slave to a thing when your value is much greater than that? It's backwards. Yani we're going to run after this and after that when your value is much greater than that. We don't need to be owned by a thing. We don't need to be owned by anything. We can own everything because we're greater than everything. Nothing should own us and occupy us continuously. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad.
Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
And the Quran continues to say what? And this world's life is but an illusion, a deception. And seriously, it just is. You know when you wake up, it's like that was a short dream, right? That short dream is longer than what this life is compared to infinity. Imagine, you're comparing 80 years, inshallah we live, 90, 100. So you're going to compare that, put it over infinity. What does it translate to? Nothing. That dream in quantity is more of a reality than this life. You get the point I'm making? It's nothing here. 80 years is nothing. Muhammad Ali will go, look what I just described to you where he was not too long ago. And will we ever enjoy the pleasures he enjoyed and the world that he had? We have to wake up from this dream. We have to see the truth and see reality for what it is. We have to stand before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and see Him in prayer. And see like Hur saw heaven and hell in front of him. That's a reality, that's a haqq, brothers and sisters. That's truth. When the Quran tells us He will sacrifice His fathers and His sons and those that gave Him shelter and all that are on the earth in order to redeem Himself, that is the state of man on that day. When a mother will lose her child in her belly, that is the state of a woman on that day. The truth of that day is so scary that you will sacrifice the entire world to save your soul. That's truth. That's the reality. Standing on that threshold is not going to be a joke. And that's what we're going towards. Imam Ali continues to say, how often does an hour of pleasure, you're lucky if it's an hour, how long does an hour of pleasure leave behind long-lasting misery? An hour at that party, an hour at that club, that bar, that thing, this, that. One accident. You're at a place, you get into a fight, you're in jail. You can't go to law school, you can't go to med school, you can't get accepted here or there. You cheat on this one exam, you can't apply here. One mistake. It's amazing. I drove for 10 years, 15 years, no accidents, right? 1 year, I can get an accident. So one mistake out of 15 years, I could be dead. I could lose a leg. It's incredible. One mistake. How often does 1 hour leave behind long-lasting misery? You get in a car, you hurt somebody. You're in an illicit relationship. You have shame to deal with the rest of your life. It's the reality we live in. One hour, one moment can leave behind long-lasting misery. Brothers, and that misery is not felt only here, it's felt in Akhirah. Dua Tawbah, what does the Imam Sajjad tell us? The joys and the pleasures have come and gone. Now I'm left to deal with the consequences of what I've done. They've stuck fast, but the pleasure has left. But the evil has remained. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. So when we make this trade, know that it's not worth it. The Quran tells us, surely evil is the price for which they sell their souls. Surely evil is the price for which you sell your souls. You buy something, all you got is evil and you sold your soul for it. They are they who buy this world with the hereafter. We buy this world, that illusion, this world that's less than a dream, for the hereafter. Because we sold our souls. For only that is which what is evil. Now, brothers and sisters, this is what I'm going to explain. I'm not telling you guys here to only go on the OC and never buy a car and never own a house. That's not what I'm saying. And I'm going to get into that. The point I'm making is, if your end game and the only happiness you enjoy is the houses, is this, is that, is these pleasures outside the Sharia, and you do haram in order to get these things, those things won't bring you true happiness. It'll only bring you temporal happiness, and then it'll go. Then that car that was 2013, tomorrow's 2014, it'll be old. You'll have to get the next one. That house, you'll have to get the bigger one. It's never satisfied. You'll never be satisfied if that is your only means. And when I say religious, does it Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad? Sorry.
Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
A second salawat.
Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
And now I'm coming to describe what I mean by religious. What I mean by religious is not one of, astaghfirullah, Allah protect us all from being like this, those arrogant religious types, those self-righteous religious types. This is not what I mean by religious. I'm better than you, this. This is not what I mean. I mean by religious, a man with taqwa, a man who's God conscious, a person who has akhlaq, a person who's pleasant, a person who's easy to deal with, a person who can compromise and sacrifice. Not a person who went to Hajj or Ziyarah and now as if he's an angel amongst us. I mean a genuine, sincere human being. Do you understand what I mean by religious? I don't mean a dogmatic, doctoral, halal, haram, fake, this, robotic, I'm better, this. This is not what I mean. I mean a person who has a soft heart, a person who can compromise, a person who's patient, who can give it and take. Do you understand what I mean? A person who fears Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is what I mean by a religious person. By being a person of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And when I say religious, so by being religious, I honestly believe it's not a matter of having nothing. When you're religious, you will have everything. By being religious, you will have everything you want and more. Seriously, brothers and sisters, by being a slave to Ruqayya and Sham, you will own this world. That's the straight truth. Be a slave to her, and this whole world is yours. Forget everything else in it. This world will chase you. You won't chase it. You won't want it. And you can enjoy all its pleasures within the halal. And that way, the end goal will be better. Do you understand what I'm saying? Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Because what does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala come and say? And He made the sun and the moon subservient to you. Yani if the sun and the moon are your servant, then why are we going to run after everything else that's less in value than the sun and the moon? If that was made subservient to you. Do you see what I'm saying, brothers and sisters? Think of it literally as a trade. Imam Ali comes and says, how bad of a trade, in a business sense, is the one who gives up his akhirah for this dunya? It's not worth it. And going back to how you can be religious and own everything. A man comes up to Imam Ja'far as-Sadiq. He says, I'm worldly. I enjoy the worldly pleasures. The Imam asks him why. He's like, I have money. He says, what do you do with that money? The man replies, I want to go with Hajj. I want to buy a house. I want to take care of my children. I give out charity and I pay debts. That's all what we want. Those are worldly pleasures. House, children, house, cars, this, that. The man, what does he reply to him? He's like, those are not worldly affairs. Those are affairs that regard your akhirah. Because his intention is different. You see? His intention is different, making all this worldly things supposedly, not worldly, but for his akhirah. So a religious person can enjoy all the treasures and pleasures of this world. But first he just has to recognize Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Then he recognizes himself. I can have a steak, it's halal. I can have a steak, it's haram. In the end, I'm eating a steak. But when I recognize Allah, then I recognize my appetite and my desire. Whereas a non-religious person just goes and does as he wishes. And there's another story of my Imam Ja'far as-Sadiq. A person comes to him and says, we're of his Shi'as. He says, how are you of my Shi'as? He comes and asks them, when something good happens to you, what do you say? We say Alhamdulillah. They say, if something bad happens to you, what do you say? They continue to say, if something bad happens to us, we cry. He says, if nothing happens to you, what do you do? They said, nothing happens, we do nothing. He looked at and said, you are nothing but like the dogs of Medina. Because my Shi'as, if something good and something bad and nothing happens to them, they always say Alhamdulillah. Because a person with wealth, when he has it, he's always going to be scared that it's going to go. His kids won't remember him, right? Religious people have kids that don't remember them, right? So when your whole world is based on just what's around you, it's only going to leave anxiety in your heart. But when you're like Nabi Ayub, his children, his wealth, his properties, and his health, all left at his property, his land, his health, his wealth, and his children all left, right? In the Quran, he continued to say Alhamdulillah, and he continued to enjoy peace and serenity. It's incredible. Whereas a person who has wealth, health, children, won't even enjoy them because he's going to be worried as they're going to come and go. He's looking at the stock prices, they drop, they risen. Always nervous, always anxious to lose them. And that's what I was saying at the beginning. I took this class once, and the Prophet was making a point. Whether heaven exists or not, religious people are more happy and are more stress-free. Why? Because they have this tawakkul on a greater justice. Whereas a person who's an atheist or not God-fearing or doesn't practice, doesn't have that. So he buries all the responsibilities on his shoulders. But whereas a person who has this belief always say, there's Yawm al-Qiyamah, and I'll collect it on that day. And always can say Alhamdulillah, and can always have that tawakkul when something is taken from him. Whereas a person who doesn't have that, everything aches when it's gone. And when he has it, he's worried that it's going to be taken. And the Quran on this point continues to say, we're regarding the believers, and do not neglect your portion of this world. I'm not there saying to anybody here, don't be ambitious, don't go to school, don't study, don't work. That's not the point. The point I'm making is don't make that your end game. Do that for a cause. Have that be subservient to you, you not to it. And the Quran says, and say, who has prohibited the embellishments or adornment or beautiful things of Allah which He has brought forth for His servants? These are for the believers in this life of this world. Here Allah is telling you, you can enjoy. These are for you. You think Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created the beauty of this world for the kafir? He created for the mu'min. He created for us, inshaAllah. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
And I want to mention one story that I think helps illustrate and demonstrate this point even better, about not letting things own you. Alexander the Great, there was this monk that always used to speak against him. So in order to carouse him and play politics and have him lighten the pressure he was putting on him, he went and visited him up in the mountains. He used to sit in the foothills. So as Alexander walked up this mountain with his palm tree and his grant and his horses and his army in his magnanimous way, this simple monk was sitting on the foothill. Alexander, who owns half the world, comes to him and says what? He says, I'm Alexander the Great. And whatever you want from here to there, I'll give you. So as this monk is simply just lying down, he looks at him and says, just move out of the way so I could see the sun. Look at that level of contentment he has in his heart. So how do we get there? How do we find that? Because there's a verse in the Quran that reads beautifully, surely the remembrance of Allah do the hearts find rest and peace. So Asya, how did she find peace? Sayyidah Zainab, how did she find peace? Khadija, how did she find peace? Surely the remembrance of Allah do the hearts find rest and peace, happiness. And we read for dua al-Ghadir, what does it come and say? And let us be with them in this world's life and the hereafter, and be among their favorites. Because what? In the dua we read, let us be with them in this world and in the hereafter, because this alone will give us happiness. Look at that. Alone will we find happiness by being with who? Muhammad wa al Muhammad. Where? Only in the hereafter? No. In this world, by being with Muhammad wa al Muhammad, you will find happiness both in this world, more so than the non-believer, and obviously in the hereafter. You win in both places. That happiness is only found with them. So even in times of tragedies, brothers and sisters, even in times of tragedies, the believer is happier than the non-believer in times of bliss. Right? Even in the times of tragedies, a believer is happier than the disbeliever in the times of bliss. How do we prove this? Karbala. Why? One camp is what? Merrymaking, drinking, dancing, womanizing, right? Pleasures of this world. What's going on? They have the caliphate. They have power. They have money. They're enjoying all the worldly pleasures. Right? What's going on in the other camp? Thirst, hunger, children crying. Who's more at peace? Umar ibn Sa'ad competing with Shimr? Or Ibn Ziyad competing with who knows who? Who's more at peace? As a man steals the bracelet from the daughter of Imam Hussein, he's crying as he's doing it. He says, if I don't do it, someone else will. As he's enjoying the pleasure, he's crying at the pain. Right then and there is a clear illustration of two camps. One enjoying the world with sick hearts, and the others enjoying that peace that Allah gives them. Hussein so Abbas is standing with who? Imam al-Hussein, right? Who's happier? Umar ibn Sa'ad standing with Shimr? I doubt it. Hur is with Imam al-Hussein. Who's happier and has a greater heart at peace? With Ibn Ziyad standing with Yazid? No. Why? But they have the power. But they have the wealth. They have the caliphate. How is this camp more at peace? Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
But one side wants the world, but the other side, the world wants them. Look at us now. Who wants who? One side, Yazid's side, wanted the world. But on the other side, the whole world wants Abu Abdullah. It's amazing. Because peace was at the heart. There's a quick story, and I'll finish off quickly, inshallah. A person comes and says, what's the strongest thing? Right? They come and say it's iron. No, fire melts iron. No, water extinguishes fire. No, clouds because it originates water. No, wind because wind pushes clouds. No, mountains because mountains is a barrier for a cloud. No, man because man stands on top of a cloud. No, sleep. Sleep is stronger than man because it overpowers man. No, anxiety is stronger than sleep because when you have anxiety, you can't sleep. No, and having a heart full of peace is stronger than anxiety. So what is it? So what's the verse? And surely the remembrance of Allah to the hearts find rest. Brothers, we have the opportunity to be better than the angels. When Imam Askar ﷺ narrates that the Prophet says, Ali is superior, or are the angels superior? The Prophet replies, the one who loves Imam Ali is superior to the angels. The one who simply loves Imam Ali is superior to the angels. And going back to where I began with the verse of the Quran which reads, Allah has promised, the first verse I read, Allah has promised the believing men and believing women gardens beneath which rivers flow of perpetual abode, and the best of all is Allah's goodly pleasure. That is the grand achievement. Allah's pleasure is the grand achievement, much less Jannah, obviously not this world. Allah's goodly pleasure, Allah being pleased with us, is the grand achievement. And that is why we are going towards Imam Hussein. Because who is closer to Allah than the Imam? Right? So by us being with him here in this world, as well as in the hereafter, who are we with? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And therefore we find happiness by being with Imam Hussein, both in this world and in the hereafter. And like I said earlier, and I'll end off with this, a mu'min in calamities is happier than a disbeliever in bliss. I illustrated that with Karbala, right? And now you come to Habib al-Mudahir. When he comes and says what? On the 10th of Karbala, he comes and says, he was extremely cheerful on that night. Habib was extremely cheerful on that night. A companion from the family of Hamdani told him, it's not appropriate to be cheerful on this night. He looks at him and says, when is there a better night to rejoice? We shall soon enjoy the maidens of paradise after this battle. In this calamity, he found peace. Another companion, Imam al-Hussein, also made a joke. And then Abdul Rahman al-Ansari looks at him and says, this is not an appropriate time to joke. He replies, people know that I did not joke now or in my youth. But what's keeping us separated from Jannah is battling with them. I wish they come and fight us now. So in difficulties, in calamities, rejoice, happiness. And the other side, in their pleasure, suffering and pain. And then I come to read this final point. Look at these companions in this situation, how they come and sleep. When you have Muslim bin Awsaj coming saying what? By Allah, even if I know I will be killed and made to rise again, and killed and burnt, and my ashes be scattered around, and this will happen 70,000 times, even then I shall not forsake you until I am killed in your obedience. A man with a part at peace. Then you have Zuhair ibn Kain. What does he come and say? By Allah, I hold dear that I should be killed and made to rise and killed again, and this happens 1,000 times. By Allah, I will still defend you and your family from being killed. Hearts that are at peace, brothers, in the struggles. And then you have Abis. What does he come out and says? He comes out, an old man who used the bandana to keep his eyelids open in order to not block his sight. He goes towards the Imam, and what does he come and say? Ya Abu Abdullah, I swear no one on this earth is dear to me and more beloved than you are to me. If I had something dearer than my flesh and my blood to sacrifice for you, to repel your murder, I would deliver it at a moment. Look at that speech. He wishes he had something more dear than his flesh and his bones to give towards his Imam. How is it in this situation of difficulty? He finds this place of peace. And this is when he charged the battlefield, and they came out and said, "Oh people, this is a lion amongst lions." And he replies, "Is there no man among you?" Then he started throwing Then they started throwing stones at him, and he took off his armor and his helmet, and he runs out saying, "Hubb al-Hussein ajannani." That's a man with peace in his heart. Unlike the others cowering away and throwing stones from a distance, the ones enjoying the path and the caliphate. And then finally, I'll end with this last companion, John, the black servant of Imam al-Hussein, when he comes and says, the Imam gives him permission to leave at this moment. And John replies, "I have been feeding at your place of happiness. Now, do I desert you in the time of hardship? Do I desert you now in the time of hardship? By Allah, the smell of my sweat is dirty and my lineage low. My color is dark. Then permit me paradise that I may smell and turn into a pleasant fragrance. My lineage become noble and my face become bright. By Allah, I shall not leave you until my black blood mixes with your pure blood." Then he rushed into the field saying, "How do the kuffar find the striking of a black sword in defense of the children of Muhammad?" Here the Imam says, "Oh Allah, brighten his face and fragrant his smell and make him known with Muhammad." Look, he found happiness. Make him known with Muhammad. He found happiness here, and he will find happiness there, being close to Allah with Muhammad, because no one is closer to Allah than Muhammad. Imam Bakr comes and says, everybody takes his dead away from the battlefield and buries them, but John had nobody. To do so for him. So his face lied mutilated on the ground, but for 10 days continued to smell of beautiful musk. Ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to allow us to be of those who enjoy the pleasures and the bounties both in this dunya and akhirah. Ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to allow us to be of Ibaduhu Salihin, the Habba of Muhammad wa al Muhammad, the Shi'as of Amir al-Mu'mineen, and the Muntadhir Imam Sahib al-Zaman. Sallu ala Muhammad wa al Muhammad.